You played super nasty Nellie Oleson on Little House on the Prairie, who was TV's original bad girl, wasn't she?
I was really kind of the first. I mean, I think of some of the wonderful actresses who were villainous children. Patty McCormick in The Bad Seed in the film. Jeannie Russell, who was Margaret on Dennis the Menace. But even then, she was just sort of like pushy and annoying. I was more really awful, and had so much fun doing it.
This was decades before Lindsay Lohan and Rachel McAdams and Mean Girls and all of that fabulousness came along.
Melissa Gilbert and I, as Lourish, we had that big mud fight, and that was actually before Joan Collins on Dynasty, when they had the big mud fight with Linda Evans.
Fans loved to hate Nellie. What back in the day, Alison, was the fan reaction like?
At the time, people had more trouble, I think, separating fantasy and reality then than they do now. Nowadays, people are, even the average person is more sophisticated. They know how TV shows are made. They see the actors on talk shows and on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook. So they go, oh, yes, they're playing. You have less people who think it's absolutely real. But in the 1970s, you didn't have any of that. You didn't have social media. And you only had a few three networks. You only had a couple of talk shows to go on. So people thought that what they saw was what they got.
That level of fame must have been extraordinary.
I remember when we had a big night. It was, I don't know, we had 40 million people watching us at one point. 40 million. I don't know that, I mean, a hit show now doesn't get 40 million because you have 10,000 channels now and Netflix and Amazon and everything else. And some people say, I don't even watch the TV, I'm on my phone. But at that time, there wasn't as much to do. You had three networks and that was kind of it. Read a book or watch this. And so we would get 40 million people. And it was weird. If you were famous then, you were famous to everybody. Now fame is sort of a niche market kind of thing, where you're famous over here and these people are famous over there. Back then, if you were famous, you were just famous. And I did a lot of my stunts, when Melissa and I went down that river, when Laura and Nellie fall in the river, they had some stunt girls when they were near the falls, but the part we were on the big clump of raft thing with the leaves on it, and we had to swim to shore and the water is like up to our necks. We did all that. And the stunt woman went down the hill in the wheelchair and did the backflip. And then they took me to another hill that was less steep, but longer so they could get more footage and just shoved me down that with no seatbelts or anything. This always blew my mind and still does, because recently, I've been doing these Facebook readings where I read the Little House books live on my Facebook, and Dean Butler, who was Almanzo on the show, he came in to read for the day and he was looking at the comments and he went, Sri Lanka? It was just sort of like, wait, what? And this is what goes on. People all over the world are still watching the show. I've been getting mail now from China and Russia. It's now gone all the way over. I have always been amazed. And so when I meet people from Bangladesh, from Borneo, from Israel, Iraq, Iran, I say, why, how, what did you get out of it? Because it's so American. It's so super duper American. It is the ultimate American story. It's Laura Wilder. Are great reading about pioneers, the westward expansion, the Homestead Act. I mean, you can't get more American. People in covered wagons, all these very blonde, blue-eyed people in covered wagons. What are you doing in Sri Lanka? Watching this? And they said, oh no, we all identified. I was like, how? They said, well, there's this family and they don't have any money and they have a lot of children. And they live in a tiny little house and they're never sure if they're going to make it week to week if the crops fail. And there's a rich family in town who are horrible to them and make their lives even harder. This is pretty much how most people live. They said most people do not have a house like on Dynasty or Dallas or any of the sitcoms, these famous houses. People live in most of the world in a relatively small house with a bunch of kids and don't have any money. So they said, we can get into this.
Now, interesting, because Little House on the Prairie had some massive name fans, like true A-listers. Bill Clinton was a fan of Little House on the Prairie. But here's the thing, Alison, that really knocked my socks off. Saddam Hussein, according to the National Enquirer, was a fan of Little House on the Prairie. Is this right?
No, this is absolutely true. The Enquirer did a story about Saddam Hussein, his lust for power, his sexual perversion, his passion for Little House on the Prairie. All right. But no, it's true, because I met Jane Meadows, and Jane Meadows, who'd been all over the world and had been friends with people in the CIA and led a very interesting life, said, "Oh yes, Little House on the Prairie, was Saddam Hussein's favorite show." Bjorn from ABBA has never missed an episode.
Is that so?
Shatner, William Shatner, of course, he's got the grandkids and all. So yes, they're big fans over there at his house. So it's everybody. It's absolutely everybody.
Johnny and June Carter Cash too were enormous fans of Little House on the Prairie.
And on the show, yes, Johnny Cash's
That's
episode.
right, they guested on the show too.
Epic. I was not in the Johnny Cash episode. That is one of the great disappointments of my life, because it was really epic, and he was apparently the nicest person ever.
I have to say, Alison, kudos to you. You've dedicated so much time to raising awareness over child sexual abuse, also HIV/AIDS, and of course that following the AIDS death of Steve Tracy, who played your husband on Little House on the Prairie.
Steve Tracy, who played Percival, marvelous person. You can tell when you watch it. You can tell what this guy, great actor, so funny. The comedic timing. He's just a brilliant person. And we hit it off right away. We became friends right away. And people who are married on television either absolutely love each other or can't stand the sight of one another. It's either or.
That's a fact.
People who are married on TV, they either hate each other or they love each other. There seems to be no in between. So we adored each other, and it really, really worked for our relationship. And we stayed friends after the show. So when he got sick and he said he was ill, and then he went public with it. He went public. Rock Hudson had just died. People were not talking about AIDS yet. Rock Hudson was just sick and just died. And here was Steve going on television telling people he had AIDS, who was on a Little House on the Prairie. People didn't do this. It was a huge, huge thing at the time. And I had people calling my house asking if I had AIDS because I had kissed him on TV. So I wound up volunteering at AIDS Project Los Angeles on the hotline and everything else they had. And because Steve, his family stood by him. His mom and his sister flew out and everything. He had people who stood by him, but other people didn't. So I was able to go and help them. And, it's one of the things I learned at one of the International AIDS Conference in Vancouver years ago. They had a paper that people with AIDS who volunteered or did political activism to help other people with AIDS, they actually did a study that their T cell count, their immune system function was higher. They had a higher T cell count, lower viral load, that the act of volunteering, the helping other people with AIDS actually had a physical effect that was good for their health, actually literally increased T cells. And that's when I wondered years later, I wonder if the same thing of volunteering and helping others would work for people with traumatic induced post-traumatic stress disorder. And it does. Go figure.
Your mum Norma was the voice of, and we're looking at some figurines behind. You explain.
Davy and Goliath. My mother was the voice of Davy.
Yes.
She was the voice of Casper. She was the voice of Gumby, and she was Sweet Polly, purebred underdog's girlfriend. Now the thing is, in most cartoons, they have a man and a woman, and that's it. So she was Davy and Davy's mom and Davy's sister and all of Davy's friends, which meant in many of the scenes, it's just her having an 8-way conversation. So
wow. What were bedtime stories like? Did she read in all of these fabulous voices?
She would do the voices and she would sing songs. And then, of course, I was a strange child. I liked, scary stories and Edgar Allan Poe because I watched The Addams Family, and I'd like, they read Telltale Heart. But she would, no, absolutely. She also, her favorite thing was she didn't know that many children's stories. So she would tell me the plots of movies. And this was hilarious. She would tell me like the plot of Cat Ballou was a bedtime story. So there was this girl, and it was the Wild West, and they tried to hang her. And then she told me all about the czars of Russia, and she would tell me, and their little boy was a hemophiliac, and there was a man named Rasputin. And literally, she would tell me historical novel tales and like weird movie plots, and these are my bedtime stories.
Alison, this has been not just a thrill, a total treat and utter joy. It's lovely to have been Zooming with you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely. Thank you very much.